Welcome, everybody. Good morning. You've made it to our third session for 2026, Land Development Academy. Thanks for being here. As usual, we're going to do a slow start, so grab your coffee. And if you don't have your mug yet, that means you need to attend two sessions or more. And once you do, email me and we'll get you a Land Development Academy mug. And we've got many, many folks who are eligible. Mostly we're doing pickups at the Permitting and Development Center. So I think that's been part of the barrier for folks. But a little preview, I'm allowed to say this because I'm the one scheduling. We will have some in-person sessions in the spring. So those would be really great opportunities for folks to come to the Permitting and Development Center and learn with us and grab your mug at the same time. But if you just can't wait till then, come on by and we'll get you your mug. So, for anyone who doesn't know me yet, my name is Bianca Machuda, and I am a community engagement specialist with Austin Development Services. Again, thank you all for being here. This is our third session for 2026. And our Land Development Academy sessions offer a deeper look at the site plan review process from experts across the City of Austin departments who work with site plans. Today we've got Austin Water. And I'm going to ask y'all to do me a favor as usual for attendance purposes. If you're joining with a group, if there's more than a single person viewing, go ahead and enter into the chat box how many people are in your group participating today. And that way we'll know the true numbers. Sometimes we've got a hidden entry where there's like 5 people in a room. We want to know about you. So before we get started, I'll quickly review our engagement format. We can go to the next slide, please. So we have an hour set aside for today's program, and we'll be starting with a presentation and close with question and answer. Questions can be posted to the Q&A bank at any time. You can select that option at the bottom of your screen, and there's a little image there of what it looks like. And if you're preferring to voice your question live at the Q&A portion, you can use the raised hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. So Q&A bank at any time or raised hand at the end. If you have any issues with either of those functions, you can chat one of the meeting hosts and we will troubleshoot for you. And while we hope to be able to answer all of your questions, if there are any that we don't have the information for, or if we don't have time, we will post a follow-up response via email. And I'd also like to note that we are recording today's session, and everyone here will receive a link to the slide deck and the recording via email as soon as they're ready. So that's all I've got for us. And now it's time to turn it over to Rebecca Batchelder from Austin Water, who's going to kick us off today.
Thanks, Bianca. I am Rebecca Batchelder. I'm with the Onsite Water Reuse Program. This is actually the first of a two-part series that will be delivered by our team. I'm going to be going over on-site water reuse systems, and then we will have Prachi Patel in 2 weeks from now going over reclaimed systems. So this intro slide is just to get everybody on the same page about the difference between the two, because sometimes people use those words interchangeably. We are on a mission to make that not happen. So on-site water reuse is projects that take water from on-site, so rainwater, AC condensate, gray water, most common sources, and use it for non-potable demand on site. So things like irrigation or toilet flushing, cooling tower makeup water demand. So that's our on-site system. And then the reclaimed system is our centralized system where we take treated wastewater and we pump it out through a pipe network that the city manages and make it available to folks that are along that distribution line. But that's limited to certain sections of the city, whereas on-site water reuse can be implemented anywhere throughout the city. So that's on-site water reuse. As many of you may know, on-site water reuse is now being required for certain development projects. So it's primarily large development projects. If you're over 250,000 square feet of gross floor area, you are required to implement on-site water reuse as a part of your project. That in most cases looks like rainwater and AC condensate captured in a single cistern and used for irrigation and toilet flushing. And there's sort of more details. You can look at this table here. There's other instances. If you have a cooling tower, you're required to meet 10% of that demand, even if you're with on-site water, even if you do not meet that 250,000 square foot threshold. We also have a couple exemptions that I want to highlight here. One is that if you're a affordable residential development project, even if you're over that 250,000 square foot threshold, you might be eligible for the exemption. Affordability has a very specific definition in the LDC, so you can look that up to see if you qualify. You'd also need to get kind of a certified letter from housing to confirm that you meet our requirements. But I'll just say that smart housing typically doesn't qualify. It's more projects that are participating in things like Affordability Unlocked that would qualify for the exemption from on-site water reuse. Though we do want to highlight that if you're affordable, there are a lot of incentives available. So it's still worth considering implementing on-site water reuse. There are quite significant incentives that are available for affordable projects that are interested in doing on-site water reuse. Additionally, there's a few folks that have sort of been unsure if their project is an on-site water reuse project. And that would be things like stormwater systems. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I have a retention irrigation stormwater system. Does that count as an on-site water reuse system? And to that, we would say no, that if it does not have a potable backup and it's not being used to sort of meet permanent landscaped area irrigation demand. It's just a stormwater control, and we don't consider that an on-site water reuse project, and therefore you don't need to do all the things that I'm going to mention in this presentation about getting your on-site water reuse system documented in your plans. There are also some very small systems that wouldn't count towards our on-site water reuse system, official requirements. And those would be, again, it's systems that don't have a potable backup. So it might be like a cistern with a hose attached to it that's not meeting permanent landscape irrigation demand. If you have any question or confusion about that, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to kind of talk you through whether your project qualifies as an on-site water reuse system. But I will note that there are lots of voluntary systems that do qualify as on-site water reuse systems in that they have permanent backup and they are going to meet landscape irrigation demands in areas that are permanently landscaped area that need to be supplied with irrigation water year round. And so even though the mandate, our on-site water reuse mandate does not apply to those systems, the requirements for permitting and design are the same. Okay, so you will still have to include elements of your design in your site plan as well as getting subsequent permits approved. So now I'm going to get into kind of what exactly is needed at the site plan stage for on-site water use system projects. I do want to kind of clarify here that there's sort of three permitting elements in any on-site water reuse system. You're going to include, mainly it's like your metering and yard line elements of the system will be in your site plan. Anything that's internal to your building, like dual plumbing, would be shown up in your building plan. And then all systems, all projects that have an on-site water reuse system will also need a on-site water reuse standalone permit. And that's where you're going to get into the details of your treatment design. But that's not what I'm going to be going over here. This presentation is focused just on your site plan. I want to help everybody get their site plans approved with as few rounds of comments as possible. And I'm hoping that this will really help. We're going to highlight, some kind of key areas that people have gotten confused, just to really facilitate people getting their projects approved quickly. It's not too much that's needed, and once you get used to it, we've found that projects are getting through this pretty quickly. The three primary submittals that you will have for your site at the site plan stage will be a meter demand sheet, a water balance calculator, and then along with the site plan sheets that you submit, there will be a few sheets that have components that show elements of the on-site water reuse system. And so I'm going to go over all three of those submittals in the subsequent slides here. Okay, so the first one you're going to do is going to be your meter demand sheet. I have kind of a small image of this. I'm not going to walk you through the specific details of it. We're actually looking to develop an updated version of this worksheet, and so we'll go into it in more detail in the presentation that's coming in 2 weeks. But just the general idea of this meter demand sheet is sort of several fold. We're trying to accomplish a lot with this sheet. But one, if you're bringing the water indoors, we want to make sure that you're identifying which fixtures are being met with the on-site water versus which are being met with your potable water, and making sure that you're meeting requirements per our section of code that mandates on-site water reuse for certain projects. So that will be one element of it, is just making sure that you're meeting the right requirements with it. We also want to make sure that your meters have capacity to meet the different demands. So if you're doing all toilet flushing with on-site water reuse, you will have a backup meter to your on-site water reuse system, and we want to make sure that that meter has enough to supply all the water that is needed by that to serve all those fixtures. So we're helping you kind of get the minimum sizing requirements. And then we also want to provide some guidance on which types of meters will be required for your project. There's a few different types of on-site water reuse projects that I will go into in the later slides, and each of them have like a slightly different grouping of meters that are required for your site. So the meter demand sheet gives a little bit of guidance on that. In our updated version, we'll kind of give even clearer guidance on exactly which meters your project will need. There's also a piece of it that if your project is doing fee in lieu, which is paying a fee towards our reclaimed network instead of implementing on-site water reuse, and I'll go into that in a later slide as well, that process of paying the fee in lieu. This brick sheet will calculate that fee for you. And then it also has some information at the bottom for setting up the billing on the meters, these on-site water reuse meters. As of right now, the process for submitting a meter demand sheet is that you will download it's like an Excel spreadsheet. You can download it off our website. You fill it out, you submit it to our email address that's listed here. We review it, we approve it, we sign it, and we hand it back to you as a PDF. And then you can include that PDF in your plans. That said, with our updated meter demand sheet, we are hoping to have a version that doesn't require a signature and doesn't require the email submittal, because we found that that's kind of causing a little bit of a jam in the review process. So we're trying to improve that. So again, stay tuned for the next presentation. Okay, so your next submittal is going to be the water balance calculator. This is also a Excel spreadsheet that you can find on our website. The purpose of this worksheet is to establish what is your required potable offset based on our ordinance that requires on-site water reuse. And so you will enter in basic project information, and it will sort of determine what type of project is required for your site. Again, in many cases, that's going to be you're required to capture rainwater and AC condensate and use it for both indoor and outdoor non-potable demands. There are some exceptions, and the calculator will kind of guide you along and tell you what you need to do. So this first sheet, you're just setting up kind of details about your project. So we can kind of tell you what the requirements are specifically for your project. So it's information about your gross floor area and your site area, all stuff that's usually reported in different places in your site plan. So it's not terribly complicated. Just make sure that you don't see any red error messages. If you see a red error message, there's some discrepancy in the numbers that you've reported in your gross floor area that you report at the top of the sheet versus the bottom of the sheet where you detail stuff about what's going on with different sections of your project. So just make sure you have no red error message. So as I said, the purpose is to establish this baseline potable offset, but the second purpose, and that's kind of what we'll get to in the second sheet, is allowing applicants to kind of customize how they're going to implement on-site water reuse to meet that potable offset. So it may not be identical to what our kind of baseline requirements are. We do want to allow flexibility for folks to make decisions that make sense on a really site-by-site basis. And as long as you're meeting the potable offset, you're good. So I will skip us now over to the second sheet in the water balance calculator, which is the OWRS info tab. So the top part of this tab is where we uh, tell you kind of based on our baseline requirements, what's written in our code, this is what is required. So in this project, you can see that they're required to do combined air conditioning, condensate, and rainwater. That's what they have to collect. So those are the required sources. And then the required demands that have to be met with that on-site water are irrigation, toilet and urinal flushing, and cooling tower. And it'll say cooling tower, I think, whether or not you have a cooling tower. So it's just if it's there, that's what you have to meet. And then also in that top section, you'll see the required cistern size, kind of a minimum cistern size. And then you'll get the kind of the take-home number, which is that 7.918 million gallons per year of potable offset. So if you do everything just as prescribed, you will get 7.9 million gallons of potable offset. That's the top section. Now, when we get to OWRS provided supplies and demands in the bottom section, that's where you get to customize it. And you get to say, okay, that's what could we change things around a bit and still get that potable offset. So some of the options for things that you can change are your cistern size. You can either go bigger or smaller. The roof area that's contributing to the cistern. So our baseline requirement is that 100% of the roof area be captured. But in some instances, people will have one building that's really challenging to capture the rainwater off of. And so they'll say, is there a way that I can get the potable offset without having that, without collecting off of that building? And in many cases, the answer is yes. You just kind of have to make up for it in another area. Another thing you can change is whether you choose to collect stormwater. So we consider rainwater to be the water that falls on the roof areas, and water that falls on ground level surfaces, that is considered stormwater. So sometimes we don't typically require stormwater capture, but sometimes we'll add stormwater as a way to compensate for either reductions in cistern size or reduction in roof area captured off of. So that's another option of something you can kind of tweak. And finally, we have the air conditioning condensate collection, how much of the building you want to capture off of. So it's not uncommon. Some people will say, I don't want to capture off the first floor because of, pumping issues. So they'll say, we're only going to capture, off of floors 7 through 8. So you have to enter in the gross floor area of floors 7 through 8, and that might be smaller than your total gross floor area. And then you can enter, it'll calculate the default capacity for that area. But if you know that that area happens to be, that's our computer room or whatever, and we have additional AC needs for, cooling needs for that room, you can add in this pink cell, you can add the cooling capacity that that room has. So I want to highlight here also a couple of things that are showing up in red. If it shows up in red, it means pay attention to it, read it. So on the right side here, where it says you have indicated you will collect rainwater from less than 100% of the total roof area, What we are wanting you to provide in that case, if you're capturing off of less than 100% of the roof area, or if you're capturing less than 100% of, sorry, if you're capturing AC condensate from less than 100% of the gross floor area, we need some sort of uh, explanation as to what you're intending to capture off of so that we can confirm in your building plans that all the AC is routed to the right places or that downspouts are, sufficient downspouts are routed. So it could be a narrative in the case of, oh, we're capturing from floors 7 through 8 and we're not capturing AC condensate from the first floor. Or it could be an image. You might show all an exhibit with all the roof areas and highlight which roof areas you intend to capture off of. And that will give us enough of a sense to say, okay, this is clear. Now we know what to look for. Okay, so the second red text that I'm going to show you here is this note that says this combination of cistern size, selected supplies, and demands doesn't get the minimum offset. So you can see here we have the total required offset is 7.9, but the offset that's being achieved here um, is 7.69 million gallons. So we didn't quite hit it. So they might have to tweak their numbers a little bit, maybe provide a little bit more storage in order to actually meet the baseline requirement. Um, and so this is one section, then I'm going to show in the next slide some other things that you can tweak, but this is kind of the primary place that a lot of people start moving things around. And the last red text that I'm going to highlight here is when we say the provided cistern size active volume. A lot of people are entering in the nominal volume, right? When you purchase a tank, it says this is a 15,000 gallon tank. Well, in most cases, you're not able to use the full 15,000 if you put a pump in the bottom of it. You kind of have to stop pumping once the water level is, a little bit above that pump. There will also be an overflow where the tank can't fill up above that overflow. So in many cases, you're working with a smaller active volume than what the nominal size of the tank is. So we really want people to make a distinction between the active and nominal volume because it's only the active volume that's going to get you additional potable offset. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next slide. This is the next set of knobs you can turn to try to customize your project to make the potable offset that you're required to make. So this will be the demands that your on-site water reuse system will be supplying. So it could be toilets or clothes washers or cooling towers or landscape irrigation. And then on the other side is the supplies. So it could be, many of these are related to gray water. It's usually folks are focusing on this bottom section here where it says outdoor supply, and that's the rainwater, the stormwater, and AC condensate. And as I said, kind of the default requirements are typically rainwater and condensate, but you can turn on stormwater if you're trying to kind of tweak it and see if you can find a system that works better for you here. And so you'll notice in this project, they actually selected no to the indoor fixtures, even though they were required to meet the indoor fixtures. But they turned that off because they didn't want to dual plumb their system. And that's why they increased their cistern size and they added stormwater to try and compensate for the fact that they weren't bringing the water indoors. They didn't quite hit it, but we were able to get them there and this project worked out without having to go indoors. So I'm always happy to make a meeting with anybody who wants to go into this and make sure that they're getting it right. But once you get the kind of concept, it's pretty intuitive, I think. One thing that this is also in the water balance calculator, it's a stormwater volume credit. I don't want to go into too much detail because there's a lot of information I'm trying to get to today. If you're interested in trying to potentially reduce the size of your water quality pond by taking credit for the fact that you're taking some of your stormwater offline. You're taking the rainwater and using it indoors. There are ways of doing that. You can get between kind of 10 and 40% reduction in your stormwater quality volume. It's not a gallon to gallon thing. It's not like, oh, I have a 400,000 gallon tank. I'm going to reduce my stormwater pond by 400,000 gallons because they operate differently. but there is an option to have some amount of reduction. We haven't had a lot of interest in this, but it is an option that we do want to extend to people. It can play a significant role, particularly if you're up at that 40% mark of kind of offsetting the costs that it takes to implement these on-site water reuse systems. So please set up a meeting if you want to talk to me more about that for your project, and we can go into more detail. Okay, so now we're going to go into the actual site plan sheets for your project. So you submit these with, it covers all elements of your site plan, and there's a few sheets that as I'm reviewing your project, I will be looking at. I don't look at the whole sheet set. I will just be looking at a select set of sheets. So we'll start with the Austin Water general notes. There's two sheets, generally speaking, that are the Austin Water general notes. And I'm going to be looking for a few things. So one, I'm going to look at your meter notice table and make sure that you have the right meters selected. A lot of times we'll have on-site water reuse systems that are only serving irrigation, and folks will include an irrigation meter. But if it's an on-site water reuse system that's serving irrigation, the irrigation demand is getting met by the on-site water, and when there is no on-site water available, it's getting backed up by a OWRS backup meter. And we're going to go in more detail later in this presentation to kind of go over the various meter configurations for different types of projects, but I just do want to highlight here that you're going to need to select the right meters for your project, and they're going to need to show up in your meter notice table. On the second page of your general notes sheet, that's where you're going to put this signed meter demand table. You'll see this meter demand table just like what we were looking at earlier. It has the signature. Again, for now, you do need that signature. So if you don't have a signature, submit it via email. I'll sign it, and then you can put it in your plans. But hopefully, we'll be able to remove that requirement in the coming months. So you're going to need your meter demand sheet in there, and then you're also going to need to show if you get a cross-connection alternative method of compliance, and I'm going to go into detail on a later slide about what that is, but if you end up needing one of those, you're going to want to put it here on your Austin Water General Notes sheet. Now we'll talk about the water utility plan sheets. This is one of the primary sheets that I'm spending a lot of time looking at in detail. The things that I'm looking for here are your meters. I want to make sure that you have the same meters shown here that you have listed on that meter demand sheet that's shown on your general note sheets. They should be labeled in all the same way, totally consistent. I want to see that OWRS backup meter in most cases. I also need to see backflow prevention as required by your project. And again, we'll get into that in some of the coming slides of what types of backflow or prevention are required for different types of on-site water reuse projects. But in most instances, we do require RPZ backflow prevention at all of the meters on your project. And they do need to be right exactly downstream of the meter, unless you have a special authorization to put them somewhere else. So I'm going to check to make sure those are there. That's a lot of the comments I put are just, I don't see your backflow, or you've used a double check valve assembly instead of an RPZ. The next thing I'm going to be looking for is this, what we'll see in the purple line. It's the line from your OWRS backup meter to your cistern. And that should be labeled as an OWRS backup line. And we'll get into some terminology on kind of how we want all these lines and meters and everything labeled in a little bit. But that's what I'm looking for, is just seeing that the line is going from the meter all the way to your cistern or wherever you're backing up your system. And then that second red box is showing the cistern itself. In some cases, the cistern is going to be inside your building, and that's fine. You won't need to show it if it's inside your building. You'll just need to have a note that says the cistern is inside the building. And I do want to see that active volume and total volume noted in the call out for that cistern to make sure that we're all on the same page, that you have space for the cistern that's going to meet the potable offset that we determined in the water balance calculator. So we'll just want to make sure that you've planned for that at this stage. However, we don't need to see your whole system design. We don't need to see your water treatment, your UV reactors, your pumps. We don't need to see all that yet. We don't want to hold up your site plan review with all of that kind of detail. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, there is another permit that you will have to submit that's for your on-site water reuse system, and that goes into all of the details of treatment and pumps and all of that stuff. So I will not need to see that, and in fact, do not want to see that at the site plan stage. So if you can just put a note that says all of the details for the treatment of this system are in my OWRS permit, that's what I want to see. And then last but not least, and you can't really see it in this example because this is serving an irrigation system, so the it kind of after the meter it immediately hooks up to the irrigation system. But if you need to bring the water indoors, say, from your cistern, we are going to want to see that line that goes from your cistern or from your treatment back into the building because that's still considered like the yard line, and that's what we're reviewing for at site plan stage, is making sure that the yard line meets all the requirements. So we'll need to see either, the line from the cistern to the building with a note that says, see MEP for continuation, or a line to wherever the irrigation system starts, and you can say see irrigation plan for continuation. So as you can see, a lot happening on that page, but it's all fairly straightforward. We just want to see that the backup water to your system is being provided. Next sheet I'm going to look at is going to be your drainage sheet. Here's where I'm going to confirm that all of the downspouts are plumbed to contribute to your cistern. Uh, and again, that's why I need to know which ones you're committing to and make sure that we have the correct roof area. It corresponds with what you put in your water balance calculator, that all of that is sufficient to meet your potable offset. So I'm checking to see that you see here in these blue lines are connecting to the downspouts of the building, and they're going directly to the cistern. And then from the cistern, we want to see that there's an overflow, so that if the cistern fills up and it overflows, it's going to go back towards your regular storm drain system and probably to a water quality and detention pond area. So that's what I will be looking for on your drainage plan sheets. And then last but not least, I will do a quick look at your irrigation plan and want to confirm that whoever's designing your irrigation system has made it very clear that they intend to connect to the on-site water reuse system. Sometimes I'll look at the first sheets, the utility plan sheets, and it shows, here's where the on-site water reuse system goes, and see irrigation for continuation. Then I go into the irrigation sheet and it's showing that it's connecting to a potable meter somewhere. It doesn't have any reference. The irrigation designer has no idea that there's going to be a on-site water reuse system. So I do want to make sure that that coordination is there and everyone's aware that there's an on-site water reuse system, and that's what's providing water for the irrigation system. But just a note, and we want to make sure that it's kind of the same place, and then that should cover you there. So that's everything I'm looking for on the site plans. I'm going to go through a few tips of like common mistakes I've seen just to help you along your way. I will highlight again that you should not include the details of your OWRS system. We do not need to see the treatment skids, private meters, sampling ports. None of that needs to be shown at the site plan stage. It'll just slow you down. All of that will be in your OWRS engineering report that you submit separately. And you do not need to have your OWRS permit approved for you to get site plan approval. You will not be able to get your building permit approved until you have your OWRS permit approved. But typically that comes later. So that should kind of help you speed things along through your site plan process. I do want to see the standard meter and yard line nomenclature. Again, I'm going to highlight that in the next couple slides. I'm going to confirm that all the RPCs are included, as I mentioned before, immediately downstream of the meters. And if they're not, I'm going to need to see that you have some approval from the water protection group that says you've checked with them and made sure that you've been able to put them downstream, further downstream. The meter demand sheet peak demands, I want to see that those match what are shown in the fire domestic irrigation demand data table. It's another table that you're showing on your Austin Water General Notes sheet that has some peak demands listed in it. So those two should correspond. They're pretty much right next to each other on the Austin Water General Note sheet. So it's pretty quick to just check to make sure that they match. And similarly, I want to see correspondence from some of the numbers in your water balance calculator that they are corresponding with the site plan data table. So that's going to be your gross floor area and your building coverage. If those things match, everything should be good to go. So those are my general tips for the site plan. Now I'm going to go into a few different types of kind of specific on-site water reuse projects. We have about 4 general categories, though there's always something that throws us for a loop, but these are the main projects that we're seeing. We've got rainwater and or AC condensate going to indoor fixtures and irrigation. We have rainwater and AC condensate going to irrigation only. We have rainwater and AC condensate going to cooling towers. And then we have fee and lieu projects. So we will dig right in and start with kind of the standard baseline requirement, which is rainwater and AC condensate to indoor fixtures and irrigation. So again, the things that we're looking at here are the meters. So you can see here there's 2 meters. We have a domestic potable meter, and then we have the OWRS backup meter. And that's what's providing backup water to the OWRS system. And those 2 meters are shown in the meter notice table. You see them highlighted here. They're the only meters shown. We don't have another potable irrigation meter. We just have those 2 meters. You see these RPZs. There's also color coding here to show where the system, where we're using purple pipe. We want to make sure that when that's installed, that pipe is purple and it basically begins immediately downstream of the RPZ. You can see that upstream, that backup meter, the water is potable water. It is providing potable water, but as soon as you get on the other side of that RPZ, we're considering it, but there's a potential that that water could have, on-site water on it, and so we want it to be purple. So that's this type of system, pretty straightforward. Now we've got the rainwater and or AC condensate to just irrigation, no indoor demand. And it's nearly identical, right? It's just that we don't have the water coming back into the building. The domestic water meter is supplying all the indoor demand, and the OWS backup meter is only backing up the irrigation demand. And in this example, you see that backup water going to the tank. That's how some people choose to do it. There's an alternative configuration that we're sometimes seeing where the backup water kind of goes immediately into the irrigation loop, and then there's a valve that can switch positions depending on the availability of on-site water. We want to make sure that the system will favor the on-site water. It will only use on-site water if there is on-site water available. But if the on-site water runs out, the valve switches and it can start pulling from the backup meter. But similar thing here, we've only have 2 meters, just a OWS backup meter, not an irrigation meter, and our standard potable meter. Next, we have the rainwater and or AC condensate to cooling tower. This is the only example where we're actually showing 3 meters. And the reason for that is that the cooling tower demand is high and it will typically use up all the available condensate and maybe even rainwater as well. So if all of the water is getting used up in the cooling tower and we're not going to have any additional water left over for irrigation, there's no sense in serving the irrigation system from that system as well. We just get another meter. That's our irrigation meter. It's a potable meter. And so we can have 3 meters in this instance. One thing I do want to point out here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but all of these RPZs are kind of in dashed lines, and that's because RPZs are only required if your storage is over 500 gallons, if your cistern is over 500 gallons. In some instances, particularly if it's just an AC condensate to cooling tower system, that the amount of condensate being generated is just immediately used up by the cooling tower, and it can just go directly to the cooling tower, and not a lot of storage, if any, is needed. So if you have less than 500 gallons of storage, you will not need RPZs on those meters. And then the last project type that I'll go over here is our fee in lieu of OWRS / reclaimed ready. So this is for residential projects. If it's a residential project, you can be eligible for paying a fee in lieu. Those types of projects are that fee in lieu goes towards expanding the reclaim network. And then the idea is that you make your project reclaimed ready, which means that everything on the private side is set up as if you were connecting to reclaimed in this moment. But these projects will be far from a reclaimed line and not actually required to connect to reclaimed. The idea being that if the reclaimed network expands and comes near your project, the city can connect you to the reclaimed system at any time, and no changes would be required on the private side. And so just whenever that's ready, we would come along and we would make the swap out of the meters on the city side, and your project would begin to operate using reclaimed, and no changes would be needed. So you can see here that there are duplicate potable meters. One potable meter is going to the potable demands in the building. The other potable meter is going to the non-potable demands in the building. And you can see that in the meter notice table. And you'll note here, all of the meters are in the potable section of the meter notice table because they are all currently potable meters, and you will be assessed impact fees on all these meters. It would only be if we came in and swapped them out that they would start to be reclaimed. You'll see also that there's RPZs. And again, you'll see in next week's presentation, and partially we'll go over how reclaimed sites will set up their meters, but you're going to see it's going to look a lot like this, right? You're going to have RPZs on your domestic and double check valve assemblies on your irrigation and I guess and on your reclaimed meter. So the idea is we get this 100% set up as if it was a reclaimed site, except that instead of having reclaimed meters, we're going to have potable meters. There's an additional kind of set of notes that I ask for folks to put on different sections of their plans if they're a reclaimed ready site that are basically indicating, yes, we are aware that our project could get swapped out with a reclaimed meter whenever the city is ready, and we're prepared for that. And I have kind of comments, standard notes for you. If you see that you're going to be a fee in lieu site, you can reach out to me, and I'm happy to provide those standard notes. Okay, this slide is mainly here for your reference if you get a copy of these slides, but this is kind of the nomenclature we're asking that people use to make everything really explicit and clear about what's doing what on the site. We don't want to see, we'd like to see the on-site water reuse backup line labeled as such, not just as a W. We'd like to see that it's an OWRS, has an OWRS label. Similarly with fee in lieu projects, we want it really clear which line is going to the non-potable so that, there's no confusion at any point when the things get swapped out. This is all color coded because this is the color of the pipes and things and meters as they will be installed in the ground. I promised I would get into cross-connection testing, so this is my slide to go over that. This is technically not the purview of the on-site water reuse group, it's the purview of the water protection group, but we do want to make sure that everyone's set up for success, so we do like to highlight this to all OWRS applicants, that any project that has an on-site water reuse system is going to be required to do ongoing cross-connection testing throughout the life of their project. In many cases, if it's not gray water, it'll be once every 4 years. The standard method for cross-connection testing, if you don't say anything, they will expect you to do a method that requires depressurization of the building and can require no water in the building for over 8 hours. So in most cases for the projects that we're seeing, that's not really feasible. If it's a residential building, you can't have the water turned off for 8 hours. So in those cases, you can apply for an alternative method of compliance for doing cross-connection testing. In many cases, the alternatives involve dye testing for water that's going into the building. Cross-connection testing can be done with dye testing for irrigation lines. The cross-connection testing can be done with a one-sided shutdown. I won't go into a lot of detail on those, but on this slide, there is a link to our website that actually has the cross-connection testing for OWS systems guidance document. It goes over some standard kind of pre-approved cross-connection testing, alternative methods of compliance. Even though they're called pre-approved, they still need a little application and they do need to be get one signature, but it can be done pretty quickly. Um, and once you get that approved AMOC, you'll slap that on your Austin Water General Note sheet. But definitely recommend looking at that guidance document we have prepared. It provides a lot of really good information on that. And here we have just additional resources you'll see on our webpage. We've got our contact information. There's a guidebook for how to design and permit on-site water reuse systems, program requirements, incentives, um, research that we've done, uh, just a lot of really good information. So if you haven't poked around on our website, I highly recommend it. We've got our program email there. You can email that, and it's typically I will be checking that and happy to answer any questions or set up a meeting to discuss the details of your project. And with that, I will turn it over for questions.
Hey everyone, we've got quite a few questions. Well, I want to review kind of how we're going to manage the Q&A portion. So, one option is going to be to post your question to the Q&A bank by clicking that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And then I'll read your question and Rebecca can respond or call out to one of our colleagues who's on the line to help as well. The other option would be to ask your question verbally. And to do that, I'll ask that you please raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And we're going to go ahead and get started. I'll toggle in between. And if there's any questions that we don't get to, again, we'll just give a written summary. So I will start looking at the Q&A box. And I want to point out that the Q&A box is different from the chat. So make sure you get it into the one that says Q&A and it has a little question mark in the speech bubble there. So the first question we have is from the very beginning of the presentation regarding the 250,000 square feet. Is that cumulative if there's multiple buildings?
Yeah. It's a total gross floor area. It should be similar to what you see in the in your site plan data table. Whatever you put as the total new, the proposed gross floor area.
Very good. Thank you. The next question is, what if the retention re-irrigation system has makeup water and is used to irrigate the site? Would that qualify as on-site water reuse?
I would have to kind of meet with you on separately. If it sounds like it might, I'd kind of want to know more about the system. If it has backup water and it's trying, I mean, sometimes you have like a wet pond where you're just trying to sort of keep a minimum amount of water in the pond. That probably wouldn't. But if it is going to irrigate a landscaped area, then it might. So I'd want to see the specifics of the project.
Okay. So I guess that person could reach out to you individually if
Hmm.
they needed help. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
good. Next question. Is there a maximum limit to required potable offset, especially relative to fee in lieu for an extra area or site?
I don't know that I understand that question. A
It
maximum limit.
continues. There's a second question. Is there any cistern water turnover time required irrespective of capacity?
We do not have a system turnover time requirement. We have seen some projects that do some kind of recirculation and aeration to keep the water from getting stagnant. But but that's incumbent upon the designer. We don't have that listed out as a part of our requirements. And I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
as far
I
as
didn't understand the first part. If they want to rephrase that or contact me offline.
Yeah, I've just allowed that person to speak if they would like to. Ms. Ziegler, if you're on the line, would you like to clarify that question for us? Is there a maximum limit to required potable offset, especially relative to fee in lieu for an area or site?
I was simply wondering if how much water, and this was more of a concern for getting water on site. Um, if there was if they did it all fee in lieu, meaning maximum, they have unlimited uh, use of the fee in lieu, then they may not be uh, contributing to their landscaping, or that was my concern. But
Okay, maybe so for fee and lieu, you're doing everything is getting met with potable until the project gets converted over to reclaimed, in which case all non-potable demands are getting met 100% with the reclaimed water. I have had people ask me like, what if you run out of water? Like, what if you just don't have enough water to meet all of your toilet flushing demands? Are you required to somehow go find more water? And the answer to that is no. The amount of water available is going to be limited by the roof area that you're collecting off of and the size of your cistern. And that's just going to be a finite amount of water. And that's why we have this potable backup meter that provides potable water in the case where your cistern's dry because it just hasn't rained in 3 months. So in that case, no, we don't require that you meet 100% of toilet flushing demand with rainwater because we understand that there could be 3 months in the summer with no rainwater. Granted, there would probably be some AC condensate, but the point stands. If you run out of water on site, you can use the backup water to meet that.
thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. Thank you both. All right. Our next question, what happens when the project has reclaimed water service?
Stay tuned. Look at in 2 weeks, there will be a whole presentation about projects that are required to meet reclaimed because required to connect to reclaim because they're within 250 or 500 feet of a reclaimed line. And in those cases, you're required to connect to reclaimed, um, depending on specific details of your project. And then the presentation in 2 weeks will talk about how to design your project and what to show in site plan if you're connecting to reclaimed.
Yes, and everyone can register for that class on the Land Development Academy website, which we'll share with you in a bit. If you're not able to make it, it will also be recorded, and all of our recordings are emailed out to attendees, but also posted on the Land Development Academy website as well.
Um, I'll just add, sorry, I think the question may be in reference to like what happens to on-site water reuse requirements if the project is connecting to reclaimed. And so in that case, if the project is connecting to reclaimed, there are no on-site water reuse requirements.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Crutchy. And also there are certain recommendations that we make for how you can set your project up such that if you're doing on-site water reuse, but think there's maybe some possibility in the future that reclaimed might come by your property and you might want to switch over, there are actually ways to set up your project to make that seamless, and we would allow that. That you have a on-site water reuse system that you were required to install and maintain and operate for 5 years, and then reclaimed came by your site. You are allowed to switch over, provided that a few kind of design requirements are met that apply to reclaimed. So typically has to do with kind of separation distances between laterals and meters and whatnot.
Right. So we've got a few more questions. Let's see what we can get in. So on-site water reuse system drawings slash submittals are separate from the site permit submittal process? Question.
Yeah, that's correct. So we just, in the site plan, all we need to see is kind of the layout of kind of the primary components that I went over in this presentation, the meters, the yard lines, the cistern. That's all we need to see. But the details of the design, the treatment, the monitoring, the controls, all of that is going to show up in your on-site water reuse permit, which will have an engineering report required as a submission, and there may be drawings attached to it. But all of that is included in the on-site water reuse permit application.
Okay, and is that similar to the license agreement process that is simultaneous and required, yet not a single set of drawings included with SDP submittals?
I'm not sure what's being referenced with regards to licensing.
That question was from Brian. Let's see if Brian's still on the line. Brian, did you want to clarify on that question?
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify the similarities to the license agreement process, which I think Rebecca answered, that the basic components would need to be showed in the site plan submittal, but the actual submittal for OWRS is a completely separate thing. So that answered the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, our next question. Who is in charge of building the on-site water reuse system? What certifications are needed for the person slash company installing the system?
We require that the systems be designed by a wastewater engineer. The installation, we do not have requirements on that. We do have a resource on our website with that has like OWRS vendors and designers, and you will find there an assortment of companies that do design and installation. And we definitely recommend people look into that and consider bringing someone on who has experience in these types of systems. We have ongoing requirements for reporting, and we're really wanting to see that these systems are continuing to operate and function, and if they don't, there will be violations issued, et cetera, et cetera. So, we strongly encourage folks at the front end to get these things designed by someone who has seen these types of systems, who knows kind of the ins and outs. They have, some particularities to them. And in order to have them operating optimally and not just be a continual headache for the building owner, you want to see that they were designed and installed correctly. But we don't have any specific requirements for the actual installers. But we will do a post-construction inspection. Will require that an engineer certify that the systems were constructed per the engineering report that's submitted with the OWS application.
All right, let's go on to the next slide. We have a couple of questions left, but I want to make sure that we wrap this up properly. So I just wanted to get everyone's feedback. If you could, check out the post-engagement survey and let us know what you thought about today's engagement. And then there again is the QR code for the Land Development Academy website, where you can find out more about the classes that are coming up and register. And I'm going to put that into the chat as well. And I made a note about the part 2 of this Austin water sessions is happening in 2 weeks. So we'll talk more about reclaim then. And I think it's probably a good time for us to wrap up. Otherwise, we'll go over. So thank you all for being here. Those questions that we didn't answer, we'll be able to get to you with the written summary that'll go out in an email with the recording and the slide deck. And in the meantime, if you have any additional questions that you didn't pose here, you can always reach out to us either at that email address, the AW one that was shown earlier, or you can always email dsdcommunications@austintexas.gov. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for the lovely presentation, Rebecca, and for your assistance, Prachi. Do either of you have any closing words that you'd like to share with our audience?
Just want to say that we are here to help you get your projects approved quickly and easily, and happy to make answer questions via email or make a little meeting and go over the details of your project. Sometimes a 20-30 minute conversation can really save you a lot of time down the road. So we always try to make ourselves available for that.
Well, thank you all for being here, and we will see you at our next session. Until then, take care.
Thank you.